Welcome to Harsh Reality broadcast on the 28th of January 2014. Now, I'd normally start off the presentation talking about economics, but what I'd like to do today is talk about, first of all, large numbers and personality types. A lot of people cannot comprehend large numbers, and what I'm going to try and do now is put things in perspective. Let's assume I shine a light from the Earth to the Moon. That would take just over 1 second travelling at the speed of light. If I then shone a light from the Earth to the Sun, that would take about 8.5 minutes travelling at the speed of light. If I were then to shine a light from the Earth to the nearest star, excluding our Sun, Alpha Centauri, that would take 4.3 years travelling at the speed of light. Now, the Moon is just over 250,000 miles away from the Earth, and Alpha Centauri is 25 trillion miles away from the Earth. That is a massive distance. It takes light 4.3 years travelling at 186,000 miles per second. In other words, every 6 seconds or so, light travels 1 million miles. So you can understand trillions are very large numbers, and I want you to bear that in mind. Now, people that watch my videos have seen me going on about personality types. There are logical people who look at facts, and there are people that are more emotive, go on intuition, and tend to have beliefs rather than actual facts. And that's why, really, when you think about it, you're going to get personality clashes, because it's just the way we're hardwired to view the world. We cannot change people. And it's true with the saying, what they say, give me a boy till the age of 7 and I will give you the man. And it's so true, because it's in those years our brains become hardwired, and then once they're hardwired, it's very, very difficult to change personalities. Very difficult. And that's why, and I know I've talked about it before, but that's why religion has such a hold on people, because once people have been brought up in a very religious background and they have nothing else to compare with, then they will go along with those belief systems. Today we tend to be more enlightened, and we can compare and contrast belief systems if you wish to do so. And then the most critical thinkers with us will question our own belief systems and other people's belief systems. Okay, with that in mind, I'd just like to talk about some economic news that has come out. About an hour or so ago, we've had some encouraging news in the UK with regards to the gross domestic product. It rose in the last quarter by 0.7%, and last year in 2013, the GDP rose by 1.9%. So it's encouraging on face value. However, that is just the face value. The reality is, people don't feel any better off. And year on year, we're feeling, actually, the average person is feeling worse off. GDP, okay, it's been increasing, but how have they managed to increase the GDP? Well, it's quite simple, really. It's by having a deficit. Now, in other words, to keep things moving along, for the governments to pay for their services, they have to borrow every year. Now, in the UK, last year, they had reduced their borrowing to £96 billion last year. The UK also reduced their deficit. They reduced it to $680 billion in 2013. So it's encouraging that the deficit is reducing. However, the debts are still increasing, and that is the problem. And that's what a lot of people don't realise. There's a big difference between deficit and debts. Now, the debts are still increasing, and it's still increasing at an alarming rate, although the rate of increase is slowing down. And a lot of people don't realise on the debts, there's interest to pay off on that as well. So the greater the debt is, the greater the interest that has to be paid on that debt. Now, from my point of view, I cannot see either the UK or the US starting to get rid of their deficit. They're talking about it. Initially, in the UK, they wanted it to be the deficit to be drawn down by 2016. They admit now that that can't be the case. In the US, they've continued with quantitative easing. That has been reduced from $85 billion per month down to $75 billion per month, and possibly it could be reduced even further. My view is, though, from my personal view, I don't think they will taper quantitative easing in the long term. I think what's going to happen is once the markets start correcting, which they're doing now, they'll go for the easy option and actually either keep quantitative easing as it is or actually increase the rate of quantitative easing. Short term, they have no choice. The debt ceiling issue has to be addressed on the 7th of February this year in the United States. I suspect they're going to go for the easy option, and that is to say increase the debt limit. So when you think about it, logically, they're not grasping the nettle. If they were to grasp the nettle, there would be a significant taper. I wouldn't say it would be wise to completely reduce quantitative easing all at once, because that would ensure an absolute catastrophic collapse now. What they need to do, though, is continue with the taper so it's manageable. But I think they're going to go the opposite way. I actually think they're going to increase the rate of quantitative easing. So it's not looking good. Despite the good news we see in the mainstream media, I still believe that the worst is to come. Only because politicians are not facing reality. They know they have a fickle public who doesn't really think critically. A lot of the public don't think critically. So it's easy to give them the good news. Yes, everything's okay, no problems, we can promise you this, promise you that, but everything has a cost. Now, we hear of the debt at the moment in the US being about $17.3 trillion. That excludes the unfunded liabilities, such as Medicare, entitlements, and pensions. That's a time bomb, because when you think about it, the baby boomers are retiring, so there's a lot of commitments along the way. So I cannot see this level being sustained. I think reality will be hitting home soon, because you can only keep the fairy tale going for so long. The other issue is gold. There's a lot of shift now from the west to the east, and I suspect reality is going to hit home with regards to the amount of gold in the central banks. I really don't think the gold is there in the quantities that people expect. A lot of that gold has been leased out. And if you've seen my previous videos, I talk about ETFs, exchange traded funds, and the paper certificates, and the fact that gold operates on a fractional reserve basis. So I thought I'd just give you a heads up. In this mood of optimism, I just want to give a little bit of reality of what the real situation is all about. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll do a broadcast shortly.